Your silence is not just a boundary, it is a wrecking ball straight through a fragile house of cards. When you stop reacting, you aren't just walking away, you are quietly starving a predator of its oxygen. Most people think walking away brings immediate peace. But what happens after you go quiet is a psychological wildfire. Today, we are breaking down the exact 7 stages of narcissistic collapse that occur when you finally cut off the supply. Think back to the chaos. Every argument, every dizzying loop of circular conversation, every time you felt like you were losing your mind, it was all designed to keep you on the hook, feeding them your energy. But the moment you drop the rope, the dynamic shifts entirely. Let's look at what happens inside their mind when the mirror shatters and the applause stops. A narcissist's entire psychological structure is built upon a fragile, hollow, false self that requires constant external validation, commonly known as narcissistic supply, to survive. Unlike a secure individual whose self-esteem is anchored internally through self-awareness, personal values, and intrinsic worth, a narcissistic individual relies entirely on the applause, admiration, and reactions of the outside world to prop up their identity. Imagine a grand, towering skyscraper that looks magnificent from the outside, but upon closer inspection, you realize it possesses no steel beams or a concrete foundation. It is merely an elaborate, hollow facade held together entirely by temporary scaffolding. That scaffolding represents the constant stream of attention, praise, and emotional reactivity they extract from people around them. Because this internal vacuum is terrifyingly real to them, they experience a chronic, low-grade fear of exposure, the deep-seated terror that underneath the mask, they are inadequate, unlovable, or fundamentally flawed. To protect themselves from feeling this unbearable internal shame, they project an image of perfection, superiority, and invulnerability. However, this defense mechanism is inherently unstable. Because the false self is completely artificial, it cannot generate its own emotional fuel. It behaves like an emotional black hole, constantly demanding fresh inputs of validation from partners, friends, family members, and colleagues. If the supply stops flowing, the entire internal architecture begins to wobble. Without external mirrors reflecting back an image of greatness, the narcissist is left alone with a profoundly fractured psyche, forcing them to manipulate, control, and provoke others continuously just to keep the lights on inside their own mind. Understanding this core vulnerability shifts your entire perspective. Their relentless need for control is not actually about you, but rather a desperate, frantic attempt to keep their own internal house of cards from collapsing in on itself. When the initial shock wears off and the narcissist realizes your silence is not a fleeting tactic, but a firm boundary, the situation enters a phase of intensified manipulation and systematic testing. Because your lack of emotional reactivity starves them of their vital narcissistic supply, their psychological survival mechanism kicks into overdrive. They view your withdrawal not as a choice for your own peace, but as a direct threat to their control. And they respond by ramping up every tool in their toxic playbook. Gaslighting becomes louder, more aggressive, and entirely detached from reality. They will begin rewriting past events with absolute conviction, twisting timelines, denying conversations that literally just happened, and accusing you of things you never did or said. The goal of this intensified gaslighting is to destabilize your cognitive footing, deliberately provoking you into an argument, a defense, or even just a frustrated sigh. Anything that proves you are still tethered to their emotional grid. Alongside distorted narratives, they will launch a barrage of erratic testing behaviors designed specifically to poke the perimeter fence of your silence. You might receive abrupt, seemingly random text messages in the middle of the night, ranging from casual check-ins meant to act as if nothing ever happened, to sudden manufactured crises where they claim to be in extreme distress, sick, or facing an emergency. These calculated ploys are entirely transactional. They are fishing lines thrown into the dark to see if you will bite. They want to test whether your resolve has cracks, checking to see if a surge of guilt, empathy, or panic will cause you to break your silence and re-engage. If you respond with anger, they use it to paint you as unstable. If you respond with empathy, they hook you right back into the cycle. Every single maneuver in this phase is a calculated stress test meant to locate the weak spot in your armor, forcing you back into a dynamic where they can once again extract the emotional fuel they desperately need to sustain their fragile ego. When the systematic testing and the barrage of manufactured crises fail to elicit even a single ounce of emotional reactivity from you, the narcissist enters a state of acute, volatile frustration. Because they are entirely dependent on your external responses to regulate their internal state, your unwavering stonewall boundary cuts off their supply entirely. This persistent lack of control triggers a profound narcissistic injury, and the internal panic they have spent a lifetime avoiding suddenly breaches the surface. When this happens, the carefully constructed mask of charm, competence, and superiority shatters, and an outpouring of raw, unadulterated rage takes over. This rage is rarely a measured response to a current disagreement. Rather, it is an explosive release of built-up internal pressure, born from the terrifying realization that their manipulation no longer works on you. This rage can manifest in two very distinct ways depending on the specific profile of the individual. In overt presentations, it looks like volcanic, window-shattering anger, screaming matches, broken objects, verbal abuse designed to intimidate, and aggressive confrontations meant to force you back into submission through sheer fear. They want to terrorize you into reacting because, in their distorted worldview, negative attention is infinitely better than no attention at all. In covert presentations, the rage takes on a colder, more venomous form, expressed through icy, silent treatments, malicious sabotage, calculated withholding of necessities or affection, and biting, passive aggression. Whether explosive or freezing, the underlying motivation is identical. They are desperately trying to punish you for withholding compliance while attempting to break your nervous system down until you finally give them the emotional reaction they crave. They are furious not because they care about you or the relationship, but because your silence has exposed their ultimate powerlessness, stripping away the illusion that they control the entire emotional ecosystem. When rage, testing, and manipulation all fail to breach your armor of silence, the narcissist executes a sudden and dramatic tactical pivot, entering the phase known as hoovering. This maneuver is not born from genuine remorse, personal growth, or a sudden awakening of empathy. Rather, it is a desperate, calculated rescue mission designed entirely to save their fragile ego from total collapse. Stripped of the emotional fuel you once provided, they experience an internal vacuum so terrifying that they are willing to swallow their pride, rewrite their own history, and perform whatever role is necessary to drag you back into their orbit. During this phase, the transformation can be staggering and deeply disorienting. The person who was screaming obscenities or punishing you with freezing silence just days prior suddenly reappears as the most loving, nostalgic, and remorseful partner imaginable. They will bombard you with messages recounting your sweetest shared memories, shedding public tears, and acknowledging past behaviors that they previously denied with absolute fury. They may offer sweeping promises of radical life changes, couples counseling, or reformed behavior, validating your pain in ways they never did when you were actually together. This performance is weaponized vulnerability at its finest. It mimics true accountability so perfectly that it can easily trigger your deepest wells of empathy and nostalgia, making you question whether you were the one who made a mistake by walking away. However, beneath the theatrical display of regret lies a cold, transactional motive. They are simply throwing everything they have at the wall to see what sticks, utilizing flattery, guilt, or manufactured sentimentality to test which emotional lever still works on you. If you accept their apology and break your silence, the illusion shatters immediately. The moment you are back within their control, the mask drops, the slate is wiped clean of their promises, and the cycle of abuse resumes right where it left off, often with intensified vengeance because you made them beg in the first place. If you have ever had to go through the exhausting aftermath of dealing with toxic behaviors, know this: your peace is worth every single uncomfortable second of their collapse. Drop a comment below with the word boundary if you are choosing your peace today, and make sure to subscribe so we can keep untangling these dynamics together. When all attempts at hoovering, manipulation, and manufactured romance finally crash against the unyielding wall of your silence, the narcissist experiences a profound shift from desperation to calculated vengeance. Realizing that you are entirely immune to their charm and that they can no longer extract any form of positive supply from you, their objective changes overnight from winning you back to destroying your credibility. This is the initiation of the smear campaign, a deliberate, malicious operation designed to protect their fragile public image by assassinating yours. Because their entire identity is tethered to external perceptions and the applause of others, they cannot accept the reality that you walked away. Instead, they must rewrite history to frame themselves as the innocent, deeply wounded victim of your supposed cruelty, instability, or malice. To execute this, they weaponize mutual friends, family members, co-workers, and even complete strangers, turning social circles into a network of flying monkeys. They carefully curate a narrative that projects their own toxic behaviors, lies, and emotional abuse entirely onto you, often utilizing a mix of half-truths, exaggerated grievances, and outright fabrications. If you exhibited normal human reactions to their past mistreatment, such as crying, expressing anger, or pulling away, they isolate those specific moments, stripping them completely of context to paint you as erratic, toxic, or abusive. They move through their social environments with a chilling urgency, seeking immediate validation and sympathy to repair the massive fracture in their ego caused by your rejection. This phase can feel deeply disorienting and agonizingly unfair because it forces you to watch someone who caused you immense pain suddenly play the role of the righteous victim. You may notice mutual acquaintances pulling away, looking at you differently, or repeating bizarre, distorted versions of events that never happened. The narcissist uses this manufactured outrage as a secondary source of supply. Every person who sympathizes with them, validates their story, or expresses anger on their behalf acts as a fresh patch on their fractured ego. They need this external chorus of supporters to drown out the terrifying internal truth that they lost control of you. Understanding the mechanics of the smear campaign is vital because it protects your peace. It reminds you that their campaign has nothing to do with who you are, and everything to do with their desperate, frantic need to control the narrative before the world discovers the hollow, destructive reality hiding behind their mask. When the public theater of the smear campaign settles and the adrenaline of retaliation fades away, the narcissist is finally forced behind closed doors, stripped of every external distraction, flying monkey, and audience member. This is where the true, terrifying internal collapse takes place, plunging them straight into an abyss of profound panic and psychological fragmentation. For all their grandiosity, control tactics, and projection, they have built their entire existence on a fragile, hollow foundation that cannot survive without continuous external validation. With your silence firmly intact, the supply lines are completely severed, leaving them alone in an echo chamber of their own deep-seated inadequacy, shame, and self-loathing. Unlike a securely attached person who might process a breakup through healthy grief, introspection, and eventual emotional resolution, a narcissist is utterly incapable of processing grief for the loss of a human connection. They do not mourn the loss of you as a partner, friend, or unique individual. Instead, they experience a paralyzing panic over the loss of their primary utility, the mirror that constantly reflected back an inflated, perfect image of their false self. Left without that mirror, they stare directly into the terrifying void of their internal emptiness. The psychological defenses that usually protect them from feeling small, unlovable, or fundamentally flawed begin to crumble under the sheer weight of this vacuum. In this dark space, they may experience a severe depressive collapse, characterized by lethargy, intense irritability, a pervasive sense of victimization, and a profound inability to regulate their emotions. Because they cannot tolerate accountability or self-reflection, this internal pain is experienced not as something to heal, but as a dangerous injury inflicted entirely by you. They feel cornered by their own unaddressed vulnerabilities, yet they are completely incapable of looking inward to fix them. This internal panic is the exact reason why they move with such terrifying speed to find a replacement. The vacuum is so unbearable, and the terror of their own true reflection is so intense that they will grasp at any lifeline or any unsuspecting new victim, just to escape the agonizing silence of their own mind. When the internal vacuum and the agonizing terror of their own unaddressed emptiness become completely unbearable, the narcissist reaches the final stage of the collapse, where they execute a definitive escape hatch. Because their entire psychological architecture is incapable of true introspection, accountability, or sitting with emotional discomfort, they cannot heal the fracture caused by your silence. Instead, they must find an immediate external solution to rescue their fragile ego from total annihilation. This manifests in one of two distinct directions, both driven by the exact same survival instinct. The first and most common path is the immediate, desperate acquisition of a brand new source of narcissistic supply. With terrifying speed and an apparent lack of human emotion, they latch onto a fresh, unsuspecting victim, a new partner, a compliant coworker, or an enabler from their past, projecting all their idealized fantasies onto this new target. To the outside world, it looks like they have moved on effortlessly, skipping merrily into a new chapter while leaving the wreckage of the past behind. In reality, this new relationship is not built on genuine affection or connection. It is a desperate medical tourniquet. They are using this fresh person as a human shield to block out the painful echoes of their collapse, forcing the new victim to play the role of the mirror and validate a false self that is constantly cracking at the seams. The alternative path, though less frequent, occurs when they cannot quickly secure a replacement, or when the injury inflicted by your boundary is so severe that it shatters their grandiosity beyond immediate repair. In these instances, they may choose total, permanent disengagement, retreating into the shadows while nursing a deep, festering, lifelong resentment. They will completely avoid your orbit, block you on every platform, and act as though you never existed, not because they are at peace, but because your very existence serves as a permanent, humiliating reminder of their ultimate defeat. Whether they leap into the arms of a brand new supply or vanish into bitter isolation, their ultimate goal remains unchanged: to flee as far away as possible from the terrifying truth that you saw through their mask, refused to feed their dysfunction, and left them stranded in the silent ruins of their own making. The journey through the 7 stages of narcissistic collapse ultimately leads to a profound realization for anyone who has chosen the path of silence. Boundaries are not just a tool for self-protection, but a complete disruption of a toxic ecosystem. When you finally stop feeding the cycle of emotional reactivity, gaslighting, and manufactured chaos, you dismantle the power dynamic entirely. Throughout this process, you witness the fragile reality of the false self, moving from the initial confusion of the narcissist to their frantic testing, explosive rage, manipulative hoovering, malicious smear campaigns, and the eventual internal panic that forces them either to seek a desperate replacement or to retreat into bitter isolation. Understanding this sequence is vital because it shifts your perspective from a place of emotional entanglement to objective clarity. You realize that their chaotic reactions, their smear campaigns, and their frantic attempts to regain control were never a reflection of your worth, but rather a direct symptom of their internal vacuum. Their inability to sit with themselves, to take genuine accountability, or to process authentic grief means they are forever trapped in a repetitive loop of dysfunction, chasing external validation that can never truly fill the void. Embracing your silence is the ultimate reclamation of your peace, your nervous system, and your life. It requires immense strength to withstand the testing phases, the smear campaigns, and the theatrical hoovering attempts without caving. However, standing firm on the other side of this collapse grants you something invaluable: freedom. You step out of the arena of constant manipulation and into a space of emotional sovereignty, where your energy is no longer hijacked by someone else's psychological survival. By choosing not to engage, you break the cycle once and for all, proving that the greatest power you possess against toxicity is simply the choice to walk away and look back no more. Stepping away from a toxic dynamic is never easy, but your silence is the ultimate catalyst that dismantles a fragile house of cards. When you refuse to feed the cycle of emotional reactivity, you strip away the fuel that powers their illusion. From the initial shock and frantic testing to the explosive rage, calculated hoovering, malicious smear campaigns, and the eventual internal panic that forces them to find a replacement or retreat into the shadows, every stage of the collapse reveals a profound truth. Their chaos was never about you, but about their own inescapable internal vacuum. Standing firm in your boundaries requires immense courage, especially when faced with the theatrical attempts to pull you back in or rewrite history. But on the other side of that discomfort lies absolute freedom. You step out of the exhausting arena of constant manipulation and reclaim your peace, your nervous system, and your sovereignty. By choosing silence, you prove that the most powerful response to toxicity is not a fight, but the quiet, unyielding choice to walk away and never look back.